Erdogan humiliated Putin, Turkey went to Aban, an ultimatum to the Kremlin, China and Kazakhstan finished off the Russian world. The collapse of the Kremlin, China cut off the oxygen, no technology, no future, no chances. A total blackout in Russia, drones staged a fire show from occupied Crimea to the Urals. Bryansk is left without power, water or heat. This is the final chord for the Kremlin. Ukraine is switching to retaliation mode. More on all this ahead. Watch until the end. Greetings from Ukraine. Today it's Renata Aslanova and the latest events. An urgent call to Erdogan. Some details of this conversation have already become known. The Turkish leader took an unexpected step. In the emergency call, Erdogan demanded that Putin stop the bloody war and move to diplomacy. Ankara has once again officially stated that Turkey is ready to take on a key role in peace negotiations on Ukraine. During the dialogue, the leaders also discussed bilateral relations and global threats, but most importantly, Erdogan made it clear that the patience of countries is running out. The president of Turkey also added that his country will continue to work in the interests of peace.
The president of Turkey stated that in order to achieve a just and lasting peace in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it is necessary to intensify diplomatic efforts.
And the day before, it became known that the Turkish company Baykar has begun testing the third prototype of the Kızılelma drone, equipped with high-precision aviation weaponry and a new Ukrainian engine. The footage of the test was released by the company's press service. The reconnaissance and strike drone completed a flight carrying a 250-kilogram aerial bomb, which was equipped with an external correction system. According to the company, with the new, more powerful engine, the Kızılelma will approach the speed of sound, and thanks to aerodynamic improvements, it will be able to perform more complex maneuvers at higher speeds. In 2021, the Turkish company Baykar ordered jet engines from the Ukrainian state enterprise Ivchenko Progress to be installed on the drone. At the same time, engine deliveries continued into 2024. This is one of the most important projects of the Turkish defense industry and has already caused a serious wave of concern in Russia. Russian media draw attention to the fact that the aircraft is undergoing tests with a Ukrainian-made engine. If Turkey hands over the Kızılelma to Ukraine as a gesture of friendship, this would be the worst-case scenario for Russia. The Russian press notes that Turkish UAVs with Ukrainian engines highlight the military cooperation between Turkey and Ukraine. At the same time, Ukrainian media note that Ukrainian-made engines give the aircraft additional power, strengthening the friendship between the two countries. It was also mentioned that Baykar has decided to build a manufacturing plant in Ukraine, where the Kızılelma and other drones for the Ukrainian army could be produced. Against this backdrop, it became known that Bayraktars have returned to the front. According to reports, Bayraktar drones, after a long pause, are once again being used in strike operations against Russian forces. Thus, medium-altitude, long-endurance drones struck a Russian boat and a unit on the Black Sea coast. And it's not just Turkey that is striking fear into the Russians, but Kazakhstan as well. Astana is stepping out of Russia's shadow and looking toward the west and Ukraine. Kazakhstan's customs has begun inspecting 99% of cargo trucks transporting goods from China to Russia that could fall under sanctions. At the same time, the Russian Federal Customs Service states on its Telegram channel that the border is open and everything has been resolved.
We are currently located in Urals, specifically in the border area, quite close to the Mashtakovo customs post. We have thoroughly spoken with the various drivers and the freight carriers, and we are now patiently waiting for them to arrive in Russia. We also spoke with our colleagues in the Republic of Kazakhstan. We have a complete understanding of how to cooperate.
But as they say, there are nuances. No one has lifted the sanctions. So many carriers, fearing inspection, are returning to parking lots to wait for a better moment.
Lines started to form in mid-September. Mostly, these are vehicles carrying dual-use goods or suspicious items that fall under sanctions. Electronics, drones and their parts, clothing and goods from Western brands. Customs inspections for such goods occur in 99% of cases.
Cargo that is not subject to sanctions typically crosses the border in 3 to 5 days, which is also longer than it used to be. According to media reports, about 7,500 trucks have accumulated at the Kazakhstan-Russia border.
there is a list of goods that are risky to transport through Kazakhstan. They will be turned back in 100% of cases. These include microchips and any kind of machinery.
Notably, media reports state that on September 18th, the Chinese side notified that, due to disagreements between the governments of Kazakhstan and Russia regarding the customs union agreement, entry and exit through the Kazakhstan-Russia border checkpoints have been temporarily suspended. It seems that such a situation has shifted the country's political direction toward the opposite of Russia. And now people in Russia are already freaking out. Propagandists are suggesting that a sweep be carried out in Kazakhstan because of the drone attack on the Orsk oil refinery.
The Orsk oil refinery was attacked by drones. The distance from the Ukrainian border to Orsk is 1,400 kilometers. It is absolutely obvious that the drones were launched from the territory of Kazakhstan. Hence the question, isn't it time to carry out a raid on the territory of independent Kazakhstan in order to eliminate threats to Russia's national security? It would be best to immediately conduct a sweep in Astana.
A great rift in the Russian world, Kazakhstan is slipping out from under the Kremlin's influence, the empire is falling apart, and Kazakhstan is yet another nail in the coffin of Putin's regime. Tokayev is changing course and seeking an alliance with Ukraine. Watch all the details right now.
Ukrainian President Zelensky and Kazakh President Tokayev met in New York for the first time since 2019. On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Tokayev stated that it was time to sit down at the negotiating table, although he did not directly condemn Russia.
Kazakhstan, according to
is still concerned about the crisis around Ukraine, which continues to inflict serious harm on civilians, undermine global trust, and weaken international security. Nevertheless, bilateral and international diplomatic efforts to resolve this conflict should continue.
Kazakhstan seems to maintain neutrality regarding the Russia-Ukraine war and offers its mediation services.
Kazakhstan initially offered its valuable services as a possible mediator, or as a suitable venue for crucial negotiations between the two opposing sides. This position has not changed.
But as they say, the devil is in the details, and there are many details in Kazakhstan's relations with Russia and Ukraine. For example, Kazakhstan refused to cooperate with Moscow on building a nuclear power plant. China will build it instead. Also, according to Kazakh authorities, they are preventing Russia from circumventing Western sanctions.
Well, we are taking measures to ensure that our territory is not used to circumvent these sanctions. Various comprehensive measures are currently being actively taken, including the meticulous tracking of goods, advanced online tracking systems for these goods, and even the innovative creation of a specialized, dedicated website where you can conveniently and easily check whether a particular company or a specific product is indeed listed on the sanctions list. This platform is known as traderradar.ca. I firmly believe that all our diligent exporters are fully aware of these crucial regulations, and consequently, they consistently and diligently comply with them in their operations.
And the president also stated that he does not recognize the legitimacy of the so-called LNR and DNR.
we do not officially recognize the independent state of Taiwan, or the sovereign nation of Kosovo, or the self-proclaimed region of South Abkhazia, or the disputed territory of South Ossetia, or the Autonomous Republic of Abkhazia. And apparently this fundamental principle will be consistently applied to your entire state territory, which in our considered view unequivocally includes both Luhansk and Donetsk.
Naturally, Russian politicians and propagandists cannot tolerate such audacity and regularly threaten Kazakhstan with war, claiming the same thing as they do about Ukraine, that these are supposedly originally Russian territories.
If we don't resolve the issue with Ukraine, then we'll have problems with Kazakhstan, Armenia, and other countries that surround us. With
Kazakhstan? Well,
just look at what's happening in Kazakhstan today in terms of, so to speak, building a certain Kazakh state, how a national mythology is flourishing there about independence, about switching to the Latin alphabet. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on there if you really take a closer look.
The situation in Ukraine is clearly mirrored in Kazakhstan. There are also huge regions there populated by Russian speakers.
some people in Kazakhstan believe that in the future, we want to take northern Kazakhstan from them according to the so-called Ukrainian scenario, as they put it. What do you think? Did we have such plans? Do we have any designs on this?
I believe that we have historical rights to these lands. These are significant industrial regions. These are important cities that were built by our ancestors. So why exactly did we give them away in 1991, and on what conceivable basis did we do so?
Because of this, Kazakhstan has created a list of Russian citizens who are banned from entering the country. This list includes a dozen deputies of the Russian State Duma, as well as the notorious Tina Kandelaki, the ideologue of the Russian world Dugin, and the late husband of propagandist Simonyan. Kazakhs brothers, what kind of ingratitude is this? Look,
take a good, long, and careful look at the current situation unfolding in Ukraine, and truly take the time to think seriously and deeply about the profound implications of these events. If you genuinely believe that you can continue to be so sly, cunning, and deceptive in your actions, and somehow manage to get away with such behavior without facing any consequences, then you are gravely mistaken and will soon realize the error of your ways.
President Zelensky has repeatedly stated, citing intelligence data, that Russia has military plans for Kazakhstan.
So the crucial information we have received indicates that among their primary priorities are the Baltic countries, specifically Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, as well as Moldova, and also Kazakhstan. These are the closest targets of the Russian Federation.
The president of Kazakhstan stated that he would crack down on any attempts at separatism, while Kazakh deputies went even further and laid claims to territories that are currently part of Russia.
As responsible and conscientious citizens, we must actively oppose any and all manifestations of radicalism, extremism, and separatism. We must be both delicate and at the same time firm in our approach, and ultimately, we must always strive to be fair.
We need to understand that Novosibirsk, for example, is not Novosibirsk, it's Nogay-Sibirsk. These are our Kazakh territories. Tyumen is the southern region of the Golden Horde, which means that even beyond Tyumen, further north, those are also our territories. And Orenburg, not Orenburg, but Orenburg, and when it was the capital of the Kazakh state.
There was also a lot of different information from intelligence, for example, that Putin demanded that Tokayev supply weapons for the war with Ukraine, and after Ukrainian drone attacks on oil refineries, he begged Kazakhstan for gasoline. At the same time, Putin constantly humiliatingly mixes up Tokayev's first name and patronymic, and probably does it on purpose.
Everyone knows that the president of Kazakhstan, Kemidjema Richatakayev, appealed for help to the members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization. So Kemidjema Richatakayev joined, and then there's also Mike Kazakhjan Kemilevich, who sees you this way, and then Kosom Jemaat Kemilevich said that somewhere he had 27 billion. Respected Mr. Kosom Jemaat Kemilevich.
Putin's plans were to draw Kazakhstan into the so-called Union State, following the example of Belarus, but nothing came of it, and Tokayev only mocks such proposals.
The other day, the president of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Gomovich Koshenko, suggested that Kazakhstan join the Union State. But I appreciate the joke for what it is. I think there is no need for this, since there are other integration associations, primarily the Eurasian Economic Union. As for nuclear weapons, we don't need them either.
Even those who seem to be Russia's closest allies understand that it's impossible to trust terrorists and murderers, so they keep their distance and, whenever possible, support those who oppose them.
Even China is becoming an enemy of Russia. Beijing has kicked Russia out of Central Asia and has taken on the role of regional master. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are slipping out from under the Kremlin's influence, and Russian ambitions are collapsing before our eyes. Has China really become Putin's new adversary? Shocking details in the report.
China is Russia's main partner, helping it keep its economy afloat and continue the war in Ukraine.
I am counting on maintaining very close and continuous contacts with President Vladimir Putin in various important forms and through diverse channels for the sake of the dynamic, robust, and truly long-term development of the profoundly significant Chinese-Russian relations. Well,
is that really the case? After all, at the same time, China denies selling weapons or components to Russia, and Chinese banks have stopped transactions with Russia because of sanctions. With
a few tens of millions of Chinese soldiers, that would be just what we need right now. And
why do you think so?
Why not?
Why? Do you really think that only soldiers should be dying?
I look at the Belgorod region and think how much we truly lack the powerful Chinese army.
Very often we hear statements from China that China has never sold weapons to Russia, and that China stands for the territorial integrity of Ukraine and wants an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Just 3 years ago, propagandists were rejoicing, saying, let Western companies leave, we'll buy everything from China.
We have now successfully bought a truly wonderful, completely Chinese manufactured car, which is absolutely amazing, and many, many times more affordable and cheaper than the cars we used to purchase before. I bought myself 3 pairs of Gucci shoes, 2,000 rubles each. Wonderful. Probably made somewhere in China too. Or hopefully even here, fake, of course. And now, as a matter of principle, I only buy fakes.
What came of it doesn't even need to be commented on, and that so-called Chinese support for the Russian economy ended up bankrupting Russian manufacturers.
And just look, for example, at what our soldiers are using, or at Russian-made cars. You have to be a real patriot to drive a Patriot, because it's insanely expensive, constantly breaks down, and the spare parts are outrageous. That's why the guys ride Chinese ones, but now they need motorcycles, Russian ones. No, for some reason it turns out that yes, there are few Russian ones.
And there are no Russian ones.
What are we talking about?
Russian motorcycles don't exist. Oh,
what is this?
I have idea.
If you look at the Russian Federation from an economic perspective, they're simply being used as a basic sales market, except when it comes to the military industry. As for civilian mechanical engineering, it's practically crippled, multiplied by 0.
When Russia has literally turned into a raw materials appendage of China. By the way, Foreign Minister Lavrov came up with a very apt metaphor, calling Putin and Xi Jinping host and guest.
As they say in the East, the guest follows the host's lead, so all the programs, of course, depend on the gracious proposals made by the Chinese president and his team to our president. In fact, from a purely economic point of view, all that China truly and genuinely needs is readily available, cheap raw materials, which, by the way, Russia possesses in abundant quantities and has plenty of not just essential gas and crucial oil, but also valuable lithium, extensive timber resources, various valuable metals, and of course, precious gold. In other words, all of this is sent there, and then China produces goods for the whole world.
Moreover, this situation manifests itself in completely different aspects. In China, new official geographic maps have been approved on which part of Russian territory the Bolshoi-Ussuriysky Island is recognized as Chinese territory. In fact, the Chinese have already settled huge parts of Siberia and turned the territory into their own colonies.
The Chinese dragon is unlikely to stay within its own country, especially since, by the way, it has certain historical claims to a significant part of our Far East. And that's a fact.
Of course, at first there was enthusiasm, but gradually it faded, and eventually we all realized that Isen had become a Chinese colony. It's simply a slave enterprise, a slave operation or a prison, call it what you will, where they put overseers in place to keep the workers in line here. Because there is still outrage, and workers in Isen have protested with the action, Isen is not China, and they also regularly threaten, that you won't be able to get a job anywhere in this city. Here's your black mark. So just sit quietly for your 15 to 30,000 and keep your mouth shut.
They are very good at waiting, and this ability to wait, this is also about the integration of Chinese people into the territory of the Russian Federation. And in fact, this is essentially already an annexation. Moreover, if you pay attention on some Chinese maps, certain regions of the Russian Federation are already labeled with Chinese names. Well, listen, why would you need to declare war for that?
Russian television is already showing videos about how to find a Chinese husband, and in Russian schools and government institutions, Chinese language is being actively studied.
Hana kahana na.
People are divided into 2 camps, those who want to study it and those who are skeptical and say, why do we need Chinese? We're not planning to go anywhere. I answer you very simply. In fact, I say, I'm not teaching you Chinese here, but using the Chinese language to make you think with your head, and that skill will always come in handy.
Putin constantly tries to characterize relations with China as a strong friendship, but Xi Jinping literally spat in Putin's face by taking away from Russia that very great victory.
And just yesterday, my very good friend and esteemed representative of the People's Republic of China treated me to this truly exquisite kind of Peking duck. I'll be completely honest with you. There were indeed 2 delicious pieces, and initially I thought I would only eat just one single piece, but I simply couldn't resist the incredible temptation and ended up eating the second one as well. You see, it was just far too incredibly delicious and utterly irresistible.
China and Russia, being the main theaters of military operations during World War II, made a decisive contribution to the victory over fascism and thus laid the cornerstone of the post-war world order.
China and Russia are neither friends nor partners, and here's what's important. As soon as China has enough motivation to limit its cooperation with the Russian Federation, believe me, it will do so. In Russia, frankly speaking, there is no choice. Either befriend China now or face a complete economic collapse, and as a consequence, political, military, and all other collapses at the same time.
So it turns out that China is not helping Russia save its economy or win the war at all, but is simply taking advantage of its weakness to seize its resources and strengthen its own influence in Asia.
A blow from where it was least expected, China, it seems, is turning 180 degrees. It has become known that importing high-precision equipment from China to Russia has recently become almost impossible. This was stated by the owner of Tadpromstan during the Forum on Metalworking and Additive Technologies.
China has restricted the supply of high-tech equipment, although this is hardly being talked about. If before it was possible to obtain machines with an accuracy of 3 to 4 microns, now it is not. A special export license is required for this.
He also noted that even exporting machines that have already been purchased from China is accompanied by unpleasant incidents. His company is engaged in localizing machine tool complexes based on Chinese technologies, and the businessman views the new restriction as a sign that Beijing is not interested in developing a partnership with Russian companies. It is noted that the restriction on the export of high-precision equipment coincided with a sharp decline in trade turnover between China and Russia. According to the Chinese Customs Service, in August of 2025, China's exports to Russia decreased by 16.4% year-on-year, which is twice the figure recorded in July. Overall, in the first 8 months of 2025, trade turnover between the two countries fell by almost 9%. Russian exports to China decreased by 8.8%, while imports from China fell by 8.2%. Thus, China has reduced its purchases of almost all types of Russian raw materials: oil, petroleum products, liquefied natural gas, timber, and coal. Meanwhile, Putin's plans are collapsing on all fronts. Moscow is facing a debacle in Moldova. The Russian puppet was spectacularly eliminated from the parliamentary race. Millions of dollars spent on bribery and propaganda went up in smoke. In Moscow, they broke out in shouting, "This is a failure." Does this mean that Moldova has closed its doors to the Kremlin forever and put an end to a Russian future? Shocking details in the report.
Russia is trying
to do to Moldova what Iran once did to Lebanon. The global response is insufficient. We have already lost Georgia in Europe.
Decisive elections for Moldova. A historic and fateful result.
We are outsiders in Europe. We don't belong there.
There is propaganda from all sides.
Everything will be fine if only there were peace.
Europe or a return to the Kremlin's orbit?
It's always important to say this. It's our civic duty, our future. We hope for it.
It's very important to participate in the voting to change our future, if we want a better future in our country so that we don't have to go abroad like our parents did.
A year ago, the country elected a president and approved the course toward European integration in a referendum. But pro-Russian forces are not missing any opportunity to steal Moldova's chance to break free forever. Russian shackles.
For peace, for continued rapprochement with Europe, for the continuation of European investments in the Republic of Moldova, and I hope for an improvement in the human rights situation if Moldova integrates with Europe.
The result of the parliamentary elections is very important because in Moldova, it is the deputies who make key decisions, including the country's foreign policy direction. That means whoever controls the parliament controls the country. In total, more than 20 parties participated in the 2025 elections. The main battle unfolded between the president's party and the pro-Russian bloc of Igor Dodon. The pro-European party led by President Maia Sandu has held a parliamentary majority since 2021. And today, the Action and Solidarity Party received 50.2% of the votes after 100% of the protocols were processed. The parliamentary opposition parties together received 43.95%. But the Kremlin is not satisfied with this. Dodon stated that his supporters should come to the parliament to defend the victory. The main threat could be a plot to organize mass riots. There have already been signs. More than 100 athletic men were detained in Serbia. They were trained to break through police cordons and seize weapons. In Chisinau, they are convinced that Russian military intelligence, the GRU, is behind this operation. The Patriotic Bloc is an alliance of the pro-Russian ex-president socialist Igor Dodon and his allies. Dodon denies any Russian interference in the upcoming July elections this year. He personally traveled to Moscow and declared that he would not support sanctions against the Kremlin. He also planned to resume purchasing Russian gas and believes that both sides are to blame for the war in Ukraine.
Once again, PAS is holding on to power thanks to the diaspora. Once again, the diaspora will do everything possible to make sure Maya Sandu and these yellows stay in power. But we are not giving up. We have submitted all the documents to the Central Election Commission in accordance with the law, including the violations that we believe took place.
Moscow, however, prepared in advance.
Dear Igor Nikolaevich, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen,
Russia has intensified its online disinformation campaign. The Kremlin-backed Matryoshka network, which works to create fake media, has become active again. We
know that the Russian Federation is actively interfering in the elections in Moldova. Moldova, our common home, is in danger. And right now, each one of you is important. You can save it with your vote. Moscow has a lot at stake, which is why it is pouring resources into the elections in Moldova. This isn't just about us, it's about the war in Ukraine.
Vote buying, organizing protests, and propaganda.
You absolutely don't need to show your face there. You certainly don't need to use your actual real name. We'll completely cover it up. They give us a brand new topic every single day. And then we make engaging TikTok videos.
Russia's attempts to influence the course and outcome of this vote are among the most powerful in recent years. 2 pro-Russian parties were disqualified on the eve of the elections. The police discovered that they were using illegal sources of funding, foreign money, but they had already worked off the Kremlin's money.
It's the same, but just like in Moscow, in Russia, there'll be an America on America.
One of them was connected to the fugitive businessman and admirer of the Russian world, Ilan Shor, who lives in Moscow. Among the parties that made it into the Moldovan parliament, the Democracy at Home party of Vasile Kostiuk stands out, with Anista, a supporter of unification between Moldova and Romania, and a Trumpist who is skeptical about supporting Ukraine. The country's electoral infrastructure was subjected to a series of cyber attacks, as a result of which about 4,000 websites stopped working. There were reports of alleged bomb threats at several overseas polling stations, violations of voting secrecy, photographing of ballots, group voting, illegal campaigning, and the presence of unauthorized persons at polling stations.
The Kremlin's failure last year forced it to spend even more money and involve even more people in activities aimed at influencing and sabotaging the elections in the Republic of Moldova.
Pro-Russian forces in Moldova have enormous financial resources, receiving funding from Moscow and actively using propaganda support. Some pro-Russian parties in Moldova ran in the elections under a pro-European guise to confuse voters.
Yes, you feel it. Yes, you feel it.
Influence on the politics of pro-Russian forces in Moldova can have far-reaching consequences, for example, using Transnistria as leverage. This region, supported by Moscow, still remains a stronghold where Soviet ammunition depots and a Russian military contingent are stationed.
The Russians
really want to influence Moldova, but how can they do that? Everything starts with politics. If you have your own parties in parliament, then your own government, then presidents and military.
Its strong presence.
Russia is getting used to living without light, heat, and apparently now without water as well. A new front line is unfolding on enemy territory right now.
In short, we just got hit hard here by drones. Really hard here by drones.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Under a powerful strike, Bryansk region, so to speak, couldn't withstand the pressure. One of the most important thermal power plants failed. It is this plant that supplies electricity to almost the entire region. Correction, supplied.
According to preliminary information, the open distribution node of the Klinci TPP 110 kilovolts caught fire.
In an instant, a fire of such scale broke out that everyone literally held their breath.
The flames reached the size of a 5-story building, plus or minus, and there were 4 loud explosions. Everything seemed to be knocked out. Nothing evaporated.
The governor of Bryansk region, Alexander Bogomaz, decided not to comment on the massive destruction of the TPP together with the Russian Ministry of Defense. The city reported the downing of 8 drones over Bryansk region, but this did not make Russians feel any calmer. Everyone around is hiding something.
The Regional Emergency Ministry reported disruptions in heating and electricity supply in the city of Klinci, but did not link this to the attack on the TPP.
Thousands of Russian residents remain literally cut off from the world.
Meanwhile, there are also widespread reports of significant heating supply disruptions occurring in the city, specifically within the Dobrovsky district, in the area of Voluska, in the Balakonsky district, and also in Kravoronsky, in the Shobitonsky district, and finally in Krygi. Restoration work is actively ongoing, and it is expected to be completed in the near future.
Meanwhile, a swarm of drones attacked another region of Russia.
There it is, got it.
For example,
public channels are reporting at least 10 to 15 explosions that hit the region, resulting in the loss of one of the largest explosives manufacturers.
In Dzержinsk, Nizhny Novgorod region, drones attacked the presumed Svetlov explosives plant.
Panic swept through the regions. No one was prepared for this kind of activity. In addition to Dzержinsk, Nizhny Novgorod was also featured in the fire show lineup. Bright flashes in the sky and loud noises. Local authorities were quick to deny that the massive explosions had seriously shaken this key industrial facility, claiming the situation was under control.
The falling debris caused several localized fires in residential areas, which were quickly extinguished. There was damage to window units, residential houses, and the roof of one gas station. No damage was done to industrial facilities.
Drones have reached even the most remote corners of Russia. Russia's most important ports aren't sleeping either. They're counting the explosions. Tuapse is on the brink. It looks like things have started in Sochi as well. The cover plan has been implemented at the airports.
45 arriving flights have been delayed. 1 has been cancelled. The situation with departures is about the same. 40 flights are delayed. 1 has been cancelled.
Peace is just a dream. Even in Moscow, the authorities, as always, are downplaying everything.
Air Defense Forces shot down a drone that was flying toward Moscow. Emergency service specialists are working at the site where the debris fell.
However, Russians are having bad luck not only on their own land, but also in the illegally occupied territories of Ukraine. In Crimea, our forces gave the Russians a hellish roasting with special effects.
In Feodosia, one of the largest oil depots in Crimea was attacked. Fuel storage tanks were hit. This depot has already been attacked many times before, and after previous strikes, only 22 out of 34 tanks remain.
It seems that after such devastating strikes, something truly large-scale is about to begin. The entire West is on edge. The liberation of Crimea is approaching. The first steps have been taken. The Kremlin is urgently developing a plan of action. But it's all in vain. Our side has taken a decisive course. Don't miss the details coming up next.
Ukraine may attack Crimea. Such a bold statement was made by Sky News analyst Michael Clark. And we're not talking about the usual strikes that the defense forces carry out almost every day, but about a large-scale one. According to Clark, Ukraine may carry out an airstrike or an amphibious landing against Russian positions in Crimea. And in his opinion, this will happen before winter.
Ukrainians love to deliver surprises. They know that this affects not only Russia on the front line, but also the West's perception of how things are going in Ukraine.
The Sky News analyst also believes that given Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities, an attack on the Kerch Bridge cannot be ruled out.
You can effectively create a significant gap in the air defense curtain, and then subsequently you will certainly want to put something quite substantial into it to ultimately get something even more valuable and strategically important.
Ukraine has attacked the Kerch Bridge 3 times. In 2022, a truck loaded with several dozen tons of explosives in TNT equivalent was used to strike the crossing. In 2023, the bridge was attacked by combat maritime drones, and in 2025, the SBU blew up the Kerch Bridge underwater. Explosives were planted near the key supports. And while the analyst's suggestion of a 4th attack seems encouraging, official Kyiv is not thrilled about it.
Of course, there's no need to write about this today. These are somewhat different stages of the war, and in general, there's no need to announce intentions in a war that has been going on for almost 4 years. Russia is still investing significant resources in countering Ukraine. We see everything they are doing. I will not comment on offensive operations. That's not entirely appropriate.
Experts and the military are also against such loud statements. There is indeed work being done regarding Crimea. Demilitarization is in full swing, but that's all. What do you need to know? This is the personal opinion of a private individual who has no
connection to the actual state of affairs. The only thing that can be said about such a publication is that it emphasizes that Crimea is a temporarily occupied Ukrainian peninsula. It has not simply disappeared from the agenda for our country's defense forces. And right now, I wouldn't even say it's just under consideration. It's actively being worked on. Currently, there is an active phase of demilitarization of temporarily occupied Crimea underway. All these so-called analytical calculations and forecasts have nothing to do with the current realities. The reality now is that the defense forces, in particular the main directorate of Ukraine, as you know, the security service of Ukraine, the naval forces and the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as other related agencies, are carrying out the necessary work.
This work consists of ongoing targeted operations to destroy Russian radar systems, air defense installations, aircraft, and so on. Ukrainians can witness all of this almost on a daily basis. And this systematic destruction of Russian weaponry is not happening by chance, as confirmed by the spokesperson for the naval forces in the information and security operations, Dmytro Pletenchuk. This is exactly where it all begins.
If you want to influence the enemy, whether on their territory or on your own territory that the enemy has occupied, the first thing you need to do is eliminate all obstacles. This will allow you to gain air superiority, which in turn means superiority on the ground. To achieve this, you need to eliminate the enemy's countermeasures. In other words, destroy their air defense systems. That's why this is the top priority target from which any further action begins.
But what exactly the next action will be, there's no need to know that. Speculation won't do any good either, especially from Western analysts. There's no need to interfere with the work or the strength of the defense. And this is a rule that Ukrainians have learned well over almost 4 years of full-scale war.
And just as Putin managed to catch his breath after the approach of the mega attack on Crimea, the armed forces of Ukraine surprise again, loading Tomahawk rockets and aiming them directly at the enemy. Moscow flinches as the sights are set on the heart of Russia. This is going to be powerful. The whole world is holding its breath. Exclusive details coming up.
A 180-degree turn. Very soon, the White House will provide Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk missiles. U.S. Vice President J. Divins announced this over the weekend in an interview with Fox News. And just 2 days later, U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg confirmed this intention. But only Trump will allow Ukraine to carry out long-range strikes on Russia.
I think that after reading what he said, as well as what Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio said, the answer is yes. use the opportunity to carry out long-range strikes. There is nothing sacred about it. And this is one of the reasons why I believe that last week President Zelensky asked President Trump to obtain Tomahawk missiles.
Just 2 weeks ago, Trump and his administration were categorically opposed to transferring, let alone using, American Tomahawk missiles to strike Russian territory. But after the meeting between Zelensky and Trump in New York on September 23rd, the White House's rhetoric changed. Ukraine's main argument is that having such missiles could increase pressure on Russia and force Putin to come to the negotiating table, perhaps even without actually using this type of weapon. The transfer of Tomahawks also drew a response from the Kremlin. Putin's press secretary Peskov stated that there is no magic weapon for Kyiv that could change the dynamics on the battlefield.
There is no panacea that can now change the situation at the front for the Kyiv regime. There is no magic weapon. And as if Tomahawks or other missiles won't be able to change the dynamics.
Tomahawk missiles have a range of up to 1,600 kilometers, which is significantly greater than the capabilities of the American HIMARS rocket systems, ATACMS, that the Ukrainian armed forces are using. The Tomahawk has greater speed and combat power compared to Ukrainian drones, which are capable of striking deep into Russian territory but often encounter modern Russian air defense systems.
This is a bad message for the military and those assisting them who are located in the Bryansk, Kursk, Voronezh and Rostov regions at the very least, as well as in the occupied territories, of course, wherever there are enemy military facilities. I believe that the demilitarization of Crimea from Russian presence will continue, as will that of Donetsk and Luhansk as well. They will be targeted even more.
President Zelensky handed President Trump a list of the necessary military aid as part of a $90 billion agreement, and Ukraine also wants to hold separate negotiations with the US regarding the supply of specific types of weapons, particularly long-range ones.
All of this is included in our $90 billion agreement, but we are ready for separate contracts for specific types of weapons, including long-range ones. I can't share any more details.
According to
the British publication Ziasan, Ukrainian attacks on the oil refining sector alone have caused Russia more than $100 billion in damage. And that's without missile strikes. Once those come into play, the amount of damage will increase many times over.
2,000 kilometers is easy. There is no longer any deep rear in Russia. Ukrainian drones paid a visit to the oil refinery in Tyumen. Notably, the local authorities did report the attack, but did so in the usual style of Russian propaganda. Everything is under control. Everything is going according to plan.
There were no casualties. No explosions or fires were allowed to occur. All enterprises in this area are operating as usual and have not stopped their work.
But people were filming a completely different picture. And after the explosions, things really took off. Ambulances and fire trucks rushed toward the oil refinery.
Before this very important moment in time,
The longest-range strikes by Ukraine had been attacks at a distance of 1,700 kilometers. The Lukoil Ukhta oil refinery in Komi on August 10, 2025, as well as the Orsk oil refinery at 1,500 kilometers on October 3, 2025. Now, however, a range of 2,000 kilometers means that a huge part of the Russian Federation is within striking distance, and most importantly, the industrial region of Nizhny Tagil, Yekaterinburg, and Chelyabinsk. These cities are located beyond the Urals. They have always been considered the deepest rear of the Russian Federation. And this is the landscape on the outskirts of occupied Feodosia, according to local Russian media, where something is burning somewhere. But the local authorities know nothing about it at all. Let me remind you that the day before in Crimea, our forces gave the Russians a hellish roasting with special effects.
One of the largest oil depots in Crimea was attacked in Feodosia. Tanks with flammable lubricants were set on fire. The oil depot had been attacked many times before, and after previous strikes, only 22 out of 34 tanks remained intact.
Nizhny Novgorod and Dzerzhinsk in Russia also became targets for drones again. Local residents filmed explosions, flashes in the sky, and the roar of engines over the cities. The Russians were clearly not prepared for this kind of action, especially for several days in a row. There was also a fire show in the Belgorod region. Local media write that the sponsor of the event was HIMARS missiles. Moreover, the entire city lost electricity.
And indeed,
the authorities are unable to provide Russians with backup power, so people will have to get used to a total blackout. After all, in Russia, everything is going according to plan. There's no money, but hang in there.
We sincerely hope that all residents will thoughtfully respond to our urgent call to equip their homes with essential backup generators. Although I fully understand and anticipate that my words will undoubtedly receive quite a significant amount of sharply negative feedback and even strong criticism, it is ultimately far better for people to openly criticize me now, in this present moment, but at least they will then be able to properly and thoroughly assess the critical situation at hand and, within the confines of their very own property, their individual homes, personally and responsibly, provide themselves with reliable backup generators for their safety and peace of mind. Tomit. Because with such a large amount of damage, next time there is a loss of heat or electricity in major population centers like Belgorod, it will take a tremendous amount of effort to restore everything. And for such a scale, I'll repeat once again, we simply won't be able to provide for it by definition. In fact, this has never happened before, even at the border. People are managing this within the framework of the decisions that the homeowners themselves have to make.
Let me remind you that on the eve of this, Belgorod was also under attack from drones and missiles. And if you think that this situation only exists in the frontline regions, you're wrong. Peace is just a dream, even in Moscow. As always, the authorities are downplaying everything.
Air Defense Forces and the Ministry of Defense shot down a drone that was flying toward Moscow. At the site where the debris fell, emergency service specialists are working. So,
Muscovites should also start getting used to darkness and cold. Zelensky threatened Putin. Ukraine's defense industry is scaling up to the maximum and accumulating super powerful weapons. It looks like winter in the swamps will be fiercely harsh.
Russia, including Muscovites, should start preparing for a cold, difficult winter. If Russia does not stop its strikes on Ukraine's energy facilities, Moscow will face a blackout.
There's no need to be too cautious in our rhetoric with the Russians. If Russia sets the goal of a blackout in Ukraine and pursues this goal every winter, I'm not sure our response and that of other partners should be any different. If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia as well.
The Ukrainian defense industry and its own production of drones and missiles is the best argument in any negotiations with Putin. The Kremlin only understands the language of force.
If any attempts are indeed made to directly attack the Kremlin, how exactly will we then perceive that particular situation?
Listen, our Supreme Commander-in-Chief, the President, has already spoken on this topic, so it's better not to even talk about it. And everyone understands that.
For the first time since the beginning of the war, on the eve of winter, Ukraine, thanks to its own production and supplies from its allies, has achieved parity in long-range capabilities with the occupiers.
Taking into account the climatic features of the Russian Federation and the tactical and technical characteristics of the Ukrainian means of destruction, the Russian Federation is facing a harsh winter both literally and figuratively. First and foremost, this concerns thermal power plants and other production facilities that sustain life and support the functioning of major Russian cities.
To strike border regions and cities near Ukraine, Kyiv has a wide range of Western missiles at its disposal.
After the recent statement by the Ukrainian president about his conversation with Trump, during which the issue of striking energy facilities in the Russian Federation was raised, including as a retaliatory action by Ukraine in response to hostile actions by the Russian side, corresponding approval was received. Therefore, we can say that the territories of the Rostov, Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk regions are within the strike zone. This has once again been emphasized regarding Western strike systems such as the Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles, as well as the modernized version of the S-200 surface-to-air missile system.
The systematic destruction of Russian oil refineries by Ukrainian drones shows that Russian air defense is incapable of protecting critical infrastructure facilities.
In several districts of the Belgorod region, only a 100 gasoline and diesel fuel are available at gas stations. Subscribers are also reporting fuel problems in the Nizhny Novgorod and Samara regions. It would be pretty epic if in the 4th year of the war we still can't take out their energy sector, but they manage to take out ours.
If, for strikes on the Russian border regions, Ukraine can use Western missiles and its own drones. For Moscow and other remote cities of Erefia, the threat comes from Ukrainian Flamingo drones with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers and a 1,000-kilogram warhead.
Usually the warhead of a modern cruise missile is 450, but at most 500 kilograms. As a rule, almost all missiles have a 450-kilogram warhead. What does a 1-ton warhead provide? If such a missile hits a target, for example, an industrial facility, 2 of these missiles will completely disable it for at least a year. That is, there will be a single crater about 20 meters across right in the center.
A mirror response will definitely come. If the Russian leadership tries again to cut off electricity and heat to Ukrainians, it will condemn millions of Russians to experience all the delights of blackouts themselves.
And what do you think about blackouts in Russia? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates and don't forget to like the video. Wishing you peaceful skies above.